Morning, everyone. So I just want to say I just got back from a 48-hour labor, so if we could all just think about 48 hours of labor. So in 2004, I walked out of a jail in Alabama, and I told myself that I was going to do something. Jails and prisons are too invisible, too pervasive, and the system just works too well to keep people locked up. In 2008, the Prison Birth Project was born. I met my co-founder, Lisa Andrews, at the CLPP conference. I got my first advice ever on how to get inside from Tina Reynolds, the founder of Worth. And after getting inside, we quickly learned about the issues affecting incarcerated people in our community. They were largely unknown outside of the jail walls. The number one thing that our members told us again and again is that shackling during pregnancy, labor, and postpartum was the worst offense. Last year, after decades of advocacy, organizing, and fighting, Massachusetts finally passed an anti-shackling bill to prohibit the shackling of pregnant people in jails and prisons. This was a victory, for after 10 years, advocates were unable to pass this bill. What made it different last year? I'll tell you what made it different. What made it different was Kenzie, was Michelle, was Moana, was Tara, was Chanel, was Ella, was Shatava, and all the other women who so powerfully shared their stories in public and in private and who fought back. Incarcerated and previously incarcerated people are what made the difference. Last year was the first time that a coalition came together and built power, together with all our advocates from Families for Justice's Healing, Black and Pink, the ACLU, NARAL, and many others. We took a standard piece of legislation that was put forth by legislators, and we made it effective. Our membership reworked it, they reworded it, they combed through it, and they made it carefully crafted policy that shared their stories and shaped a new narrative around incarceration and motherhood. I met my co-organizer in the campaign, Kenzie Wood, while she was inside jail in a Prison Birth Project group. She was pregnant. She gave birth to Titus Allen Johnson on January 23rd, 2013, and was released in October of that year. 2 weeks later, at our annual event, she stood in front of over 100 strangers and told her story. This year, she did the same thing, and she said, "When I got out of prison, I was able to share this horrible experience of being restrained while in labor, and in 1 year, I was able to pass a law with that experience." Kenzie juggled phone calls, interviews, probation, and more in between the intensity of parenting her baby Titus, who was diagnosed with leukemia at 5 months old. And now, just as PBP was with her when she had to say goodbye to Titus after his birth, PBP is by her side while she does something no parent should ever have to do and say goodbye to little Titus as he leaves this world. Kenzie's work was more than just organizing work. Kenzie's work is healing work. This year I've been so inspired by the Black Lives Matter movement, seeing young folks all across the country stand their ground. I've thought deeply about how media and these images of individuals are changing the landscape of the movement through the deeply disturbing visuals we've seen that depict the entrenched white supremacy and the fight against the state for justice. I've thought about what these images mean and about how seeing people and their families suffering, grieving, dying has spurred so much movement. And then I think, what aren't we seeing? We don't have civilian bystanders with cameras in jail. What kind of movement would we be building inside and outside against prison expansion and treatment of people in prison if we had those images? The images of a 5-month pregnant woman in 5-point restraints with a suicide vest on and cones over her hands in solitary confinement for 48 hours. Or of a woman 24 hours postpartum with 27 stitches on her perineum being shackled in 5-point restraints and marched out of the hospital without her baby and milk leaking through her orange jumpsuit. This after proclaiming that she just experienced the most powerful thing she's ever done in her life and stating, "I struggled knowing what love is my entire life. I just felt love for the first time in the last 24 hours before her baby was taken away by the state." Why we organize? We organize for the decriminalization of motherhood, of birth, of parenting, of birth workers, of poor people of color, of drug users, and to end jails. We organize because each person inside jails and prisons in Massachusetts has a family, has the right to family creation and to define for themselves what that means. We organize because those of us who've been incarcerated very rarely see justice. So now our task is implementation. Our task is organizing and training people in our communities to know about this legislation and know what to do if a family or friend has been violated. It's to put constant pressure on advocates who passed this bill to use their power now to continue to put pressure on the Department of Corrections, on the Sheriff's Department, on medical providers, and courts to keep people unshackled and further that legislation. Prisons break people, and yet our legislators in Massachusetts have introduced 2 new bills to build brand new prisons and jails in our state to house more folks who can't make bail or are 9 months pregnant. But there's also something super inspiring going on that could make a huge deal in people's lives. So I'm going to say a bunch of long-winded names, and you can learn more about it if you live in Massachusetts at our table. But I want you to call your legislators and name these bills. Speak these words and tell them to support them. Out of all the legislators, some of these bills have 2 supporters on them. So get a pen. There's Senate Bill 1491, pretrial and bail reform. It would make money bail a thing that is non-existent in Massachusetts. Poor people would not be held. House Bill 3321, community-based sentencing alternatives, so that moms and general caregivers of kids would not go to jail. They would have alternatives, which we don't have now. Senate Bill 968, youth record expungement. Senate Bill 1770, eliminate mandatory minimums related to drug offenses. The Department of Justice says to do this. And the last 2, Senate Bill 1874, the Justice Reinvestment Act, and Senate Bill 1001, an act promoting restorative justice practices. Thank you.